Hello, welcome. Thank you for tuning in to CCDC Shorts, where our goal is to deliver critical information on hot topics for your business. My name is Colleen Roth, and I'm the president of the River Heights Chamber of Commerce. CCDC is the Chamber Coalition of Dakota County, representing 5 chambers, 6 cities, and over 1,500 member businesses. Our focus today is to break down the recently signed marijuana law, break down what that means to our businesses. I'm excited to have John Houseleden with us. John is the president of the Minnesota Trucking Association and has spent countless hours digging into this legislation. Thank you for joining us today, John.
Well, thank you, Colleen. It's good to be here today to talk about this bill that was passed, and it's a big one. It's complex. When we were going through the process, it was 250 pages plus 50 pages of changes in current law. So it was a big deal. And if you boil it down, what it does do is it legalizes the possession and use of marijuana for those 21 years and older. And so this has big implications for businesses and certainly the citizenry across the state.
Exactly why we're having this conversation today, John. So can you tell us what exactly is this law and when does it go into effect?
The law, for practical purposes, goes into effect August 1 of this year, and that is with regards to the use and possession. If you think of this bill, there's some really big buckets. One bucket is, basically making it legal to use and possess it. That's one bucket. There's another bucket, which is expunging criminal records for misdemeanor use in the past, and there's about 60,000 cases that they're going to go through and deal with. And then there's another bucket, which is really the commercialization piece. And if I were to describe this law, essentially it is a commercialization bill, because most of the wording, most of the structure, there's a new Office of Cannabis Management, is really to foster the development of what they're calling this, craft brew-like industry, which we think has a lot of problems, but it is the law today. So those are the three main buckets. And I think what's really important for employers to focus on is that this is going to impact what we do. So let's talk about sort of 3 rings of employees that this could impact. The center ring would be those that are mandated to do drug and alcohol testing per federal regulation. The trucking industry is an example, airlines, railway, barges. You can pick a whole bunch of other industries. Those industries where testing is mandated, nothing changes. You still can't use it as a truck driver, still can't use it as a pilot. You can't possess it, none of that. Nothing changes. The second ring, though, is what we call safety sensitive positions. And these are positions that, by the very nature of what they do, you have people doing something that could affect the lives of other people. Now it expands. Could be healthcare, could be teachers, all the transportation modes. So that's the safety sensitive population. And then the third ring is really everybody else. So what does this mean from an employer perspective? If you are in that center ring or the second ring, you can still do pre-employment drug testing and you can do random testing if there's those first 2 rings. But if your employees are in that third ring, you can't. You can't use it as a condition of hiring someone, and you can't just randomly do it. So and this is where it starts to get muddy. So I think the first thing that's really important for employers to do is to review all of their job descriptions and determine, do they fall under a mandated testing protocol or are they safety sensitive? And you can define if it's safety sensitive. Now, it needs to be reasonable, it needs to be defensible, but you can do that. It needs to be in the job description. But then along with that, it is really important that you have clear company policies that are articulated and laid out and that you use them. So we talk about, you can, as a company, ban the possession and use of cannabis during working hours. So even though it is legal, you can ban the use of it and possessing it at the work site during working hours. And that's not just on site, but when they're in a company vehicle, which is important. We get that as truckers. But think of your members who are an HVAC company or a swimming pool cleaning company or landscaping, you're in company vehicles, you can ban that. And if someone is suspected of violating the company policy, let's just say they look impaired, they're running a forklift and all of a sudden they're running into stuff, you can then do reasonable suspicion testing to validate whether or not they are under the influence. So I think when you boil it down for the employer community, you need to just step back, take a look at your policies, work with HR, and make sure, again, I'll just restate those, validate if they are required to have testing, if they're safety sensitive, you craft clear policies, you lay them out, and you follow them. Now that's what you do. I think the real challenge for all of us is people are going to be impaired. This is part of the argument we made. So maybe they come to work impaired, right? They can now, if you think about where can you consume, you can smoke it, you can drink it, you can have gummies, you can have it in your private home, you could have it in your backyard, you could have it in a business that does not have access to the public, a business or a property, right? If it's fenced off, or you could be a place that sells it. That's where it can be used. Essentially everywhere else it can't be, but that's where the rubber is going to meet the road, because we know the use is going to flow over. It's going to be in places it's not legal, and frankly there isn't going to be a lot of enforcement to put teeth into this, and that's one of our greatest concerns.
Wow. I don't even know where to begin. So let's say you're in that third tier, right, that you talked about. An employer suspects that someone has done marijuana and they're at work and they're impaired. So the testing, let's talk a little bit about the testing that's available. So if someone is tested for marijuana, doesn't that, like, a positive result will show even if they've consumed marijuana in the past 48 hours? Is there any sort of testing that's readily available to tell if the person is currently at the moment impaired while they're at work?
Well, this is the challenge. So there are tests that can detect presence. So if we go back to, if you have a company policy that says you can't use it and you can't possess it, right? But it's in your system, you don't know when it was consumed. So that's sort of the catch-22 for the employer. A blood test is really the only way to assess the level of impairment. And that's not super practical, but
Right.
again, I think you have to think a bit larger, and just to say, listen, we don't want impaired employees working, running a drill press, running a punch, right? Giving care to our loved ones in a nursing home. So if you think about it, it doesn't really matter what is causing the impairment. Could be cannabis, could be some other medication, could be alcohol. I mean, frankly, you could be sleep deprived. So I think that what employers need to think through is, don't fear the cannabis specifically, but have good policies that just talk about, what do we do when we suspect that employees are impaired? What is our process? How do we take them out of that safety sensitive position? What is the process to validate it? That you have a good protocol. And I think, HR staffs are going to have a lot of work here. I think what it does is just creates one more avenue where the likelihood of impairment goes up.
Mm-hmm. Jen, can you speak a little bit to, and you've done a lot of research on the topic, so other states that have legalized marijuana and cannabis, how has that affected the business communities there?
Well, it does. And I think what is a challenge is, let's take trucking. We know for a fact, Colorado, I have a member who has operations in Minnesota and Colorado. It's become incredibly difficult to hire new drivers because they cannot pass the pre-employment drug test. They just can't. And I think the other thing with employers, the challenge is, well, if someone may be under the influence, but you can't tell the level of impairment, maybe it's in the system, but you can't tell if they're impaired. Some employers are just looking the other way, saying we're just not going to test, because if we have the data, then we know. So the argument that, well, other states have done this, it's all worked out, the business community has figured out, no, they're just going like this. We're just hoping bad things are not going to happen. And we need a workforce to, all these jobs we have, maybe that aren't safety sensitive, but it has created a lot more risk. So this isn't the most encouraging topic today. But again, I think it gets back to being diligent, having good policies, and, just having, your leadership, your line leaders, all of those people having good awareness so that they can keep the employees safe, they can keep the operation safe.
Thank you. And before we wrap up, just one more quick question.
Yes.
Where can employers go, their HR departments, where can they go to get the information that they need in order to put the correct legal language in place? Do they need to consult an attorney? Will this Office of Cannabis have like a quote legal division or some sort of support for HR departments? Where does your 50-person employer go, their HR people go to get some information, what they can and they cannot do?
The state's not going to be a great resource on that. Again, they're more focused on giving money to build these businesses. They're not focused on helping existing businesses manage it. And, we said that. So, yes, you're going to need to engage an employment law attorney. So I know you as a chamber are probably going to develop programming and content. We're doing the same. We already have a webinar that we're sponsoring in June, put on by an employment law attorney focusing on what this means. And there's no charge, so we would welcome your team. And we're going to post that. I think that's part of what this is going to be, a group sourced opportunity for the business community to create resources. We'll share with every entity, whether a member or a company or not. And I think other groups are going to do that as well, because it's critical. And it's like so many of these things, the challenge is until they're litigated, you don't really know. So we have a ride ahead of us here, but it's manageable. I think Minnesota business owners, this has been a tough session. This is one more thing to manage, but I know they care about their people. They care about doing it right. And we will continue to push for answers and resources so that our employers are not left hanging.
Thank you. That's great. And we also, CCDC partners, would be happy to share that and promote that as well as a resource for our businesses. Thank you.
Right.
Again, John is the president of the Minnesota Trucking Association. Thank you, John, so much for your time and your insights today. It's not always the best news, but it's really important for our businesses to have this information. So CCDC is planning a series of webinars to help you understand the effects of this session on your businesses by taking a deeper dive into several issues. Marijuana legalization is one of those issues. Watch your local chamber announcements and visit our CCDC website at dakotacountychambers.com for information and an archive of our video, our CCDC shorts. In closing, I'd like to thank our CCDC partners, chambers of Apple Valley, Burnsville, Lakeville, Hastings, and the River Heights Chambers of Commerce. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and have a Chamber of Commerce day.